Fancy seeing you here. Today we're looking at more of the best stories from r/prorevenge. Volume 2. The last story is especially satisfying for any of you with an incessantly loud neighbor. Let's dive in. Our first story is titled, "My manager was an awful person to me, but I got her fired in an embarrassing fashion." Years ago, shortly after I graduated high school, I got a new job to support myself during college. The new gig was in a pet store and I was working in the department that sold the fish, aquariums, reptiles and birds, etc. etc. The store manager was an awesome guy who I will call Kurt. Kurt was an old school guy. He went to work, worked hard and went home. That's all he expected out of you as well. My immediate manager over my department was this large snaggletooth witch of a woman. I'll call her Stephanie. We got off to a bad start because she quickly found out that I knew more about reptiles than her. She preferred the fish, whereas I had kept snakes for the past 4 to 5 years. Her ego couldn't handle a fresh employee not needing her guidance. From then on she was terrible to me. She singled me out to clean the goldfish tanks, and had the other employees cover sales every day I worked. She would say rude things to me such as, "You are the weak link in my team, you are the reason I'm having problems in this department." Fast forward about a year, my hours had been cut by about 25%. I asked the store manager what the deal was and he told me that our department had lost too much money between lack of sales and broken merchandise etc. This puzzled me, but I didn't think much of it because everybody's hours were cut. Simultaneously, myself and a few co-workers had noticed something strange. Stephanie had recently taken much more interest in the customers. She insisted on helping certain customers and sending us to do busy work while they were there. A customer came in one evening and was talking to us about how nice Stephanie is. Turns out Stephanie was breeding mice and selling them to customers outside of the store. We found out she was breeding all of her animals, her dogs, turtles, mice, and selling them to customers she met through our store. Not only was this taking business from us, our store had a couple corporate policies. We did not feed nor sell mice as live food for snakes, and we donated a lot of time and money to shelters, and we condemned breeding dogs and cats for sales. Stephanie was making money by selling animals to the customers all the while her department had hours cut for all of its employees. It didn't quite make sense how this was costing us so much money until one evening I thought I had figured it out. Stephanie was an otherwise lazy woman, but when one of her customers came in she was by their side the whole time. I watched closely as she followed a customer around helping them pick out a cart full of expensive aquarium decorations and terrarium supplies like lights and bulbs. I followed and wrote down every item she grabbed. I wanted to see where this went. She directed the customer to a register and went to check them out. She's lazy, and would never do this for any other customers. I noted the time and went back to work. I later spoke to other cashiers about Stephanie checking customers out, and they said that she only ever rang up certain customers and she acted weird when they did it. They suspected she was abusing coupons or the more applying hefty discounts. I got my co-workers to corroborate my story about the under-the-table animal sales and suspicious behavior, and I went to talk to Kurt. I handed him a paper with about 20 UPs and the time written on it, and I said, "I think if you look up a transaction from register 2 at this time last night you will find a large discount applied to it. These are the items I would expect you to find on that transaction." He was a bit puzzled and I explained everything to him. I told him I didn't want to make any accusations before because I wasn't sure, but after seeing her in action I was pretty sure something was going on. He thanked me and assured me he would look into it. A couple weeks later I was at work and I noticed Kurt was standing near the door watching closely. It just so happens Stephanie was coming in for her shift right about that time. The second she walked through the door he called her over to his office. Apparently waiting in his office was a regional manager from corporate. He looked at the list I gave him and looked up transactions from the night before. He found one at the exact time I wrote, but it only had about half of the items I listed, but every item that was on the receipt was on the list I gave him. This prompted him to watch her for a few weeks, and in that time frame they found her to be taking her customers around shopping, personally taking them up to the register and scanning every other item and putting the expensive stuff into the cart without ringing it up. In that time span she had given away over $1,500 in merchandise, and he looked back at the logs we keep for broken merchandise that is written off and found an excessive amount of aquarium supplies and decorations that were signed off by her. It was something like 1,000% more written off broken merchandise than was found at the same time last quarter. All in all, she was charged with stealing/defrauding the store in over $3,500 in merchandise, and it just so happened that Kurt had already arranged for police to meet them after firing her to escort her out. I don't know if she went to jail, but I did watch her get walked out by police with about 20 employees staring. I wish I could have said something, but I had to settle for her making eye contact with me as she walked out, to which I gave her a quick wink. Our second story is called, My Lawyer and I Laid a Trap for My Adulterous Alcoholic Wife in My Divorce. When I got divorced, my alcoholic wife of 18 years had started another affair, this time with her addictions counselor. My lawyer and I laid a trap for them. Just in case you don't know, intimate relations between a counselor and patient are very frowned upon by the regulatory bodies. And I was more than pissed after putting her through rehab, $25,000 which I didn't have to do, only to have her fall back into her old behavior. Shortly before the divorce was finalized, I filed a complaint with the state body licensing health professions. Knowing they were in some peril because of their unprofessional relationship, I had already gotten him fired from a major teaching hospital. She had backed off her exorbitant demands. I paid her a very modest settlement, kept the house, got custody of the 3 teenage kids, plus got child support. Her lawyer naturally included a clause in the divorce where I had to agree to not say anything negative about her lover and their relationship. But the lawyer messed up and never asked if I had already filed charges and thus didn't require me to rescind them. Her lawyer had assumed I was just bad-mouthing them to neighbors and friends, and it never occurred to the lawyer that we were doing much more. When the Board of Health Professions responded to my complaint shortly after the divorce was finalized, I told them that it would take a subpoena to get me to testify. A subpoena trumps an agreement in a divorce settlement. They were happy to oblige. They stripped his license, and placed him on a register of sanctioned health professionals. He never worked again. They were broke in a handful of years, and she divorced him when the money ran out. In the interim his mother had died, leaving a fair-sized estate, so it took longer than I expected. Oh, and the frosting on the cake was that his wife and I traded notes, notably hotel receipts from the time of their affair, that helped each of us in our respective divorces. Justice was served. Our third story is a doozy. It's titled, A Woman Let Her Dog Crap on the Airport Floor. So I pooped on her plans. While walking to my gate at LAX, I noticed a woman whose dog was in the middle of doing its business. The woman was loudly FaceTiming with her back to the dog, so I assumed she didn't notice. That was likely the thought shared by the gentleman who tried to get her attention. "Excuse me, miss," he said, in a polite tone. The woman glared at him. "Your dog," he sheepishly continued, pointing to the mid-poop pup. The woman rolled her eyes and went back to FaceTime as the man slinked away, seemingly embarrassed. "Some people," she bellowed to her FaceTime companion with no hint of irony, "are just so damned rude." When her dog finished, the woman started walking away, leaving everything right on the airport floor. Another woman tried to stop her. "You're not going to clean that up?" she asked, as shocked as the rest of us were. "They have people for that," the offender replied, disappearing into the crowd, as much as someone yelling into their phone can disappear into a crowd. I stood near the pile and warned people to walk around it while someone else got a maintenance worker's attention. No one said anything. We were so shocked that anyone could be that horrible. When I got to my gate, the woman was there, too. Great. We were both going to Tokyo. When I travel abroad, I get embarrassed by other Americans doing things 100 times less embarrassing than leaving animal feces on the floor of an airport. To make it worse, her dog was now barking at everyone who walked by. I have nothing against people flying with their dogs, I do it often. But it is a privilege I take seriously. My dog is well trained and behaves better than most people. He certainly behaves better than that beehole. Speaking of beeholes, there is a pet relief area inside LAX past security, just 2 gates away from where the party pooper let her dog go to town. It didn't matter, she was the type of person to litter 3 feet from an empty garbage can. While her dog barked at the world, the woman had moved from FaceTiming with no headphones to listening to music with no headphones. I don't like to throw around the word sociopath, but I don't know how else I could explain just how selfish and terrible of a person she was. I'd bet her car was somewhere in long-term parking, parked across 3 spots with paint on the bumper from the child's bike she hit without leaving a note. Everyone else tried to ignore her, sitting as far away from her as they could. I am not everyone else. I sat down right next to the horrible woman. "Are you going to London on business?" I said. "I'm going to Tokyo," she responded gruffly, annoyed that I interrupted her DJing. "Oh," I said. "Then you better hurry. That flight got moved to gate 53C. This is the flight to London." I figured I could give her a little moment of panic as payback for how terribly she was treating everyone. I didn't predict what would happen next. She grabbed her bags and her dog in a huff, and stormed out of the gate without even checking. She was so self-involved, she didn't notice that the monitor at our gate still said Tokyo and almost everyone at the gate was Japanese. Based on her actions, she believed me that the fight had been moved, so she's also a beehole for not thanking me. Some people, I thought as I watched her rush away from the gate without stopping her, are just so dang rude. The flight to Tokyo was at gate 69A, so the 53 gates were on the other side of the next terminal. And I felt guilty knowing she probably berated some poor clerk who had to explain to her that there was no gate 53C. I don't know if she made it back to this flight before we took off or not, but I didn't see her board and I don't hear her dog. Her missing her flight was not my original intention, but it would be a fine punishment for her being so rude to everyone and making a low-paid stranger clean feces off the floor. What makes me wonder if I went too far is the knowledge that Delta only has 1 flight to Tokyo each day. Whoops. Maybe she can rebook on another airline. I hear they have people for that. Our 4th story for the video is called, College Professor Passes Out Handwritten Textbook. This is a story I recall from college. As any college student is aware, textbooks have been a scam for a very long time. Some professors used it to their advantage. In fact, one professor I had assigned 5 required books for his class, 4 of which he authored or co-authored and received royalties from that we barely used. One of my favorite professors was fed up with the college textbook scam. He authored an engineering textbook but was furious at the price the bookstores were charging students. The publisher and the university own most of the rights to the textbook, so he didn't have any control over pricing or distribution. He did find one caveat to the publisher's contract. Even though he could not reproduce and distribute printed copies of the book, or any of its contents, it didn't say anything about non-print content. So my professor hand-copied the entire text, including equations, graphs and figures. He made copies of his handwritten textbook and passed them out at the beginning of class. We had to hole punch and put it in a binder, but it was well worth a couple $100 savings, and my professor got some revenge for the unethical practices of college textbook publishers. Our final story is great for those of us wanting to get back at annoying, noisy neighbors. It is titled, Downstairs Neighbors Wouldn't Turn Down Music, Nuked Them from Orbit. Flashback to 2014. Or so. I moved out on my own in 2013 and moved into an old house converted into a 2-floor apartment, directly across from my future in-laws. The downstairs neighbors were loud. Blaring music at all hours, yes, all of the hours, wouldn't cut the grass or take out the trash on our shared schedule. Crappy neighbors, but never bothered me directly. The guy was pretty chill when sober and would turn the music down a little when I texted him. He was okay until his girlfriend moved in. Now, add shouting matches to the mix, and all of the sudden my requests to turn down the music makes him turn it up. I can barely walk on my super thin floor without her banging on the ceiling with a broom. I was okay since I am a heavy sleeper and could sleep through anything. My wife moved in, and I quickly found out that she is quite the opposite. Fan on turned at a certain angle in the doorway of the bathroom, door closed halfway. Blackout curtains with them taped to the wall so zero light comes through, zero sounds other than the fan. You get the idea. I told her that we can't expect them to remain silent when she's ready for bed, we need to be reasonable, but the wall rattling music needs to stop during the night. She hated it during the day, but I told her there's nothing we can do then, so she would go to her parents' house a lot during the day. I talked to neighbor guy. He said yeah man that's cool, but it turns out the girlfriend wasn't having it. His attitude then changed to yeah well it's our house so you can go F yourself if you think you can tell us what to do and you can move out if you don't like it. Something definitely had to change once she was pregnant, and then the baby came. So I did the only thing I could do. I fought fire with fire, and maliciously complied with the law to the T. I could only report them for noise after 11 p.m. I now forget the morning hour when the noise could start, but I believe it was 9 a.m. My dad has these huge old concert speakers in his garage. Professional grade, black leather bound, 5 feet tall and 3 feet wide, and a pretty nice, vintage stereo amp. He has 2, but my apartment was so small I sadly only had room for 1. We replaced our coffee table with this thing, laid face down onto our thin, office carpet. Tired of his crap tunes, I tested this Geneva Convention breaking device when they weren't home. Holy cow. I had to take everything down from tables, counters and shelves because they would shake off. I prepared audio files to feed the stereo. I was giddy like a kid with a new Christmas toy. I turned it on when I left for work and got my wife up to send her to her parents. I came home from work and hung out at her parents until it was close to bedtime. They resisted for 3 days. On day 2, I found a pile of manure on my doorstep, but it didn't faze me. I cycled between sine/saw/square waves in clashing chords, marching music, Washington Post march on loop, preaching clips. They weren't just atheist, but outspoken anti-Christian, so it was a must. The most stupid songs you could think of, Captain Planet theme song, chicken dance, etc. This poor old house rattled in ways I didn't think possible. The vibrations from the sine wave would make your vision blur. I eventually got a text from him that reads, "Sorry man, you can stop now." I did not. He needed a few more days to let it sink in. Plus I had so much fun putting it together. They complained to the police and the landlord. There was nothing they could do since I wasn't doing anything wrong. I didn't even hear music during the time of peace to follow. It was so quiet. They would build up their courage and try again every few weeks when I wasn't home, but my wife was. I then showed her how to tame the beast so she could let it loose while I was away. I had to give them a spanking every now and then, but they learned. They were so happy when we moved out. What do you think of these stories? Would you go to these same levels for revenge? Let us know in the comments below. And remember to like and subscribe for a new video every day. Ta-ta for now.